Good afternoon. Let's begin. There's an international meeting today on the need for solidarity between cities and countries that accept refugees, and Greece is prime among those, and Lesvos as well, alongside other towns and cities, and islands as well. We had the deputy mayor of Thessaloniki who spoke, and we had the Syrian representatives, and Mr. Galinos, who is the mayor of Lesvos, is present today as well. And he spoke at that event, and he'll be with us today to speak about the situation on his island that is continuing to receive refugees and receive very little help in doing so. And it is losing hope in the promises made by the European Union. So, after Mr. Galinos, we'll hear from Mr. Papadimoulis, who is the Vice President of the European Parliament, so that he can say a few things. First of all, Mr. Papadimoulis. Thank you very much. We rightly say, quite often, that people are not numbers. However, there are times when numbers speak volumes about people's lives, particularly when we're talking about hundreds and thousands of people who are fleeing war zones, and their numbers do speak a lot about their situation. Lesvos isn't just an island in the northeastern Aegean, although it is a very beautiful island. It's an island of 85,000 people who, in recent years, has accepted 500,000 refugees. 95,000 still resident there. The country came to international attention, and the humanitarian work of its residents and the way in which they welcomed the refugees was splashed over the front pages of newspapers all over the world. However, that's not enough. They're not enough. Europe has to take its responsibilities for Greece and Italy, and particularly for Lesbos. It is those areas are bearing a disproportionate burden. The flows of migrants are being processed very slowly because of the operational weaknesses of the system, and these are weaknesses in the European Union and the refusal of many member states to take their fair share of refugees. They don't even apply the joint decisions that have been taken. Today's press conference and this morning's event, as Mr. Kouloglou said, is an attempt to join our voices to have the agreement on relocation applied across Europe, with member states opening up those places that they have been attributed. 10,000 people are ready to leave Greece and be relocated, but they're being blocked by the refusal of some member states. So this process needs to be sped up. We need to get rid of that decision taken by some member states unjustifiably to refuse taking on refugees. They have to meet their humanitarian obligations. And those countries who have only accepted a few tens of migrants have to accept more. Furthermore, we have to increase help to improve reception conditions in Greece, particularly in Lesvos. We have to have better conditions for children, and they need to have humane conditions, and all of the agreements need to be applied. There needs to be peaceful living alongside the locals. So we have to take into account that the people of Lesbos are bearing a disproportionate burden. The Greek government is pushing for quicker processing, and it is respecting as far as it can the processing of the European funds for this. And I would like to underline the fact, which is often overlooked, that most of the money that comes into Greece from the Commission regulation is given to NGOs and isn't given straight to the Greek government. So NGOs as well must provide more. They must show greater transparency when it comes to managing those funds. That's all I have to say today, so I'll stop here. I have to say in closing that I'm very pleased at the initiative that's been organised, and there is great international attention and participation from across a range of countries, and that shows that, at least in the European Parliament, Greece is not alone. 1 month ago, there was an overwhelming majority that voted in favour of something that is evident, which is that member states must take their quota of refugees. It mustn't be just Greece and Italy bearing the brunt. Thank you. Now let me give the floor to the Mayor of Lesvos, Spyros Galinos. First of all, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity at such a crucial point for Lesvos and Greece to raise the voice of Lesvos. A few days ago, at a national level and at European level, we have been trying to draw attention to the fact that some member states of the European Union were not stepping up to the plate. They don't understand the importance of this issue for Europe. And so I'm here to repeat that request and appeal to local authorities, because when there is a disproportionate burden and one area cannot bear it, then when it's spread around, it becomes bearable and easy to deal with. So this is why Greece is appealing to its fellow mayors and local authorities around Europe. We've begun to cooperate with other European municipalities, and today was a very important moment because we were able to speak to all of those mayors and heads of local regions. There is a desire to help and to show solidarity, but also to put pressure on their governments. So I'm really grateful for this invitation. It's come at exactly the right time. We need to try to unblock this process. It's really threatening Europe, and they need to understand that the real danger that we're facing is the way in which we deal with this migratory crisis. The only dangers are the increase in racist opinions and expressions. And I've been saying this since last year, and unfortunately I've been vindicated, and if you can say it like that. I mean, we've had the negative consequences of these opinions. We've had the electoral results in various countries, and the far right and fascist movements are on the rise, and they're becoming very dangerous. So Europe needs to be aware of that fact. All of us need to be aware of that. The real danger is not the people that we're raising walls against. The real danger are the ideas that are undermining the principles of our society. Europe has paid the high price for these sorts of ideas in the past. Let's raise a wall against those ideas today. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mayor. Are there any questions? Would you like to talk to us a little bit about the current situation on your island? In terms of the flows of migration? What about the reactions of residents? Is there anything that's going against the welcome of these refugees? Well, yes, as you said, our island does welcome a high number of refugees. In three villages are hosting just 3,500 refugees. That is a burden that we could bear, and we showed that yesterday. We had daily flows of over 7, 8 or 10,000 people. They were given spaces. And unfortunately, the big problem was that negative voices were given validity in this democratic space. People acting out of self-interest, and they hesitate at nothing. They want to get people to rise up, and they want to exploit opportunities for extremism. And they want to see these views translated into electoral wins. Their mistake was to underestimate the level of solidarity that exists around Europe. Are there any questions? Well, in terms of the promises that were made to Greeks and to your island in particular, in terms of providing help and staff from the European Union, Frontex, etc., so from a more technical side, what's happened? Do you have any idea? Are there delays? Are there absences? Well, from last year, when we realised that the crisis was becoming extreme and acute, I felt that history was calling us, and what I said, I would act as in a state of emergency, and so we started behaving in an unconventional way, if you like, but at the height of the circumstances that we were facing, we were trying to find a solution, any solution. And the EU was aware of this, and the Greek government was aware of this as well. We heard a lot of promises from Europe, it's true. They said that they would act fast, they would provide support for those municipalities that were suffering. But we didn't get support from them, we only got it from the government. I should admit that we've had excellent cooperation with the current minister, but also previous ministers. But Greece alone can't manage this. It can't bear the entire burden on behalf of the whole of Europe and the whole of the world. It needs support. Greece is in a difficult economic state. You understand that beyond the humanitarian crisis, it needs resources. We've just got more funds, but so I think that things will become a little easier from here on out. It's absurd, though, that when we know that local populations and the municipalities that represent them are those bearing the brunt, it's ridiculous not to fund them, not to support them in managing the spaces that they already have at their disposition. So they need to be receiving the resources alongside NGOs to manage these spaces. I'm sure that the fact that the money isn't getting through is due to the types of agreements that have been signed, and they were wrong. They need to be improved. So we need the agreements to be improved. And it's the EU-Turkey agreement says that it's not permitted to move or transfer refugees from one island to other places, and that is an absurd factor in the agreement. I mean, they distributed the burden throughout Greece, that's the idea, but then it was supposed to also distribute the burden throughout Europe. Maria Neo from the Athens agency, news agency. Mr. Papadimoulis, in light of the summit that will happen on the Thursday and Friday, European leaders have already said that they will apply the agreement on agreement. What's stalling? You said that you've got 10,000 refugees ready to be transferred in Greece, but there's a big delay to the programme. And Greece is still expecting support, economic support, and staff. So what do you think is the cause of all of these delays? It's not just because some countries are not accepting to implement the agreement. I think it's an operational problem. And I'd like to ask the mayor of Lesvos, can you tell me how many refugee children are currently being housed in Lesvos? And how many of them go to school? And could you also tell us about unaccompanied minors? What's happening with those children? Thank you. As SYRIZA MEPs and as the left group, what we are asking from member states and the Commission is that they honour their signatures. In other words, implement the decisions that they've taken. There is a huge delay in the implementation of the agreed transfer programme and the mission, the expert mission to Greece to assist the registration process and the asylum application process, and from member states as well. These delays are so extreme that they cannot be attributed just to administrative or bureaucratic problems. These are a lack of political will on behalf of the European leaders to apply the decisions that have already been taken. And this deficiency is so great that it's threatening the European Union with dissolution. And that's not something that I consider to be true. This is something that has been said by Jean-Claude Juncker. If Europe cannot face up to its refugee crisis, it faces dissolution. That's what he said, his words. Europe cannot work à la carte. Mr. Orban and Mr. Kaczynski's government in Poland or any other government cannot take money for their farmers and their infrastructure, but refused to accept even one refugee or send one blanket. Greece has been raising this issue in all fora, and we will bring it up, of course, at the summit. And of course, we have a lot more allies now and a lot more support than in the past. The European Parliament is one of our allies. in terms of the Greek struggle, because we have over 70% who voted in favour of this provision, which I think should be evident, self-evident. So now we're calling on the solidarity of the media and citizens groups and local governments. And I think that's the way to move towards better practice and mobilise citizens to pressure their governments. Thank you. Mayor. Well, Ms. Aroni, I don't have an exact number for you, but what I can tell you is no refugee child on the island will be prevented from going to school. All children go to school. They will get the education in the best way possible. As regards unaccompanied minors, beyond the structure that I talked about, there are other structures on the island that have been opened by NGOs, and they house unaccompanied minors. And if I may, I just want to raise the issue of education, because indeed there have been problems on the island because some schools have been reluctant. But as I said before, no refugee child will be prevented from going to school. I would like to remind you that there's so many more people from Greece who live abroad, and they go to school and universities, and they're given the opportunity to progress. And so it is unbelievable that any Greek person would protest for a foreigner to go to school in their town. Any other questions? Yes.
Sorry, I'm from the Parliament magazine. Can I just ask a couple of things? Your opinion on how sorry, not directly related, but the French and British, in particular, the British handling of the situation at Calais. Only today, the British have been taking in young people. There seems to be some doubt, apparently, about whether as to their ages. That's one point. The other question, please, briefly your sort of opinion on the way Viktor Orban in Hungary has been dealing with the refugee situation there, in light of the recent referendum, please.
Well, I'll give you an answer. I think the position of Great Britain towards the problem of refugees is outrageous. You know, these people are escaping the Islamic State in Syria and Iraq, and also the bombing and the war in Afghanistan. And you know who has created this monster, the Islamic State? United States and Great Britain, when they invaded Iraq in 2003. And now they're saying, no, we don't want any refugees, we have nothing to do with that. They are taking no responsibilities. They're just saying, that the Greeks should take care of this. They're closing the borders. This is a behavior that is against not only the laws of humanity, but also the respect of every, country, respecting itself. Who is going to take responsibility for all this? If not United States and Great Britain. And we have in the United States Trump saying he's promising to close all the borders, and we have Great Britain closing already the borders, not accepting refugees, and the refugee question is to become one of the main arguments for the Brexit. Come on.
I'd like to answer the second aspect of your question about the Orban government. His government's position is unacceptable. He is throwing in the bin not only the Geneva Convention and not only the part about protection, international protection for asylum seekers, but he's also throwing away the Council agreements on refugees which Orban himself signed. This is an enormous step backwards to a nightmarish past in which Europe was overrun by racism and xenophobia. And this is a shame, because Mr. Orban should know that hundreds of thousands of Hungarian refugees were welcomed by other states, including member states of today's European Union. The Commission has a proposal that any member states that refuse to meet their obligations when it comes to taking refugees, according to the decisions of the Commission, Council and Parliament, they would have to pay at least the economic equivalent of that, so that other member states can take those refugees and take them in good conditions. Unfortunately, this Commission proposal has been shifted onto the Council, and they're not even talking about it seriously. Any decisions that have been taken have to be implemented, and the forces of the EPP in the Commission and the Council need to stop treating Mr. Orban with kid gloves. The government of Poland doesn't belong to the EPP and accepts the pressure and takes that pressure, but Orban, who is a member of the EPP, needs to experience the same level of pressure. He cannot go forward in this way. We can't have a Europe a la carte. We can't have Greece, Spain, Portugal and Italy saying, well, we have to stick to these rules, and at the same time having Mr. Orban throwing these conventions and decisions in the bin. Any other questions? Okay. Just to tell you that at the meeting called Solidarity for Cities, Mr. Galinos set out a proposal, which is here, the European Network of Cities, the answer to the refugee crisis. And it exists in Greek and English. And you can get a copy of that, and you can go to the meeting of 2:30 in Brussels, which will be here in Parliament. So thank you very much for coming, and the chair kindly thanks the interpreters as well. Thank you.